Good morning and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the release of our findings from the 2023 report card for Michigan's infrastructure. My name is Andrew Rosell, founder and president of AR Engineering, and I am a member of the Michigan Report Card Committee and past president of the American Society of Civil Engineers Michigan section, or ASCE. Like you, I care deeply about the safety of our environment and the reliability of our infrastructure. We rely on airports, ports, inland waterways, roads and bridges to move freight throughout the region, transit systems to get people to and from work, the energy grid to keep homes warm in the winter and business operations operating, the water systems to keep us healthy. Throughout my career, I have seen firsthand the massive impact infrastructure has on the well-being of Michigan's citizens and economy. First, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today in Lansing, a place where lawmakers have made important decisions about the future of our state. I would also like to thank the Report Card Committee, many who are here today, who have dedicated countless volunteer hours over the past 2 years. Another big thank you to the staff at ASCE who have worked with us continuously to make this happen, not to mention their unwavering patience. Allow me to provide a little background as to who the ASCE Michigan section is and why we're here today. The Michigan section is a local chapter of the ASCE Society, which is the oldest and largest civil engineering society in the nation, originating in New York City in 1852 and serving 150,000 members. The Michigan section of ASCE started in 1916 and currently maintains 2,500 members across 6 active branches throughout the state. Those branches include Northwest, Western, Saginaw Valley, Southwest, Lansing Jackson, UP, or Upper Peninsula, and Southeast branches. People in Michigan know all too well the importance of reliable infrastructure. When infrastructure is working, it is typically out of sight and out of mind, while we carry on with our daily lives, daily commutes, expect Amazon packages at our doorstep, and enjoy Michigan's recreational activities around the Great Lakes. It's when infrastructure is overwhelmed, such as dams failing to withstand unexpectedly large rainfall events, bridges posting load restrictions that send cargo trucks on long detours, or water levels rising and shutting down our recreational areas. Those are the times when we think about our infrastructure. We cannot ensure the well-being of residents and our businesses and industries without reliable infrastructure systems. As stewards of our infrastructure, civil engineers are responsible for the planning, design, construction, operation, and maintenance of our vital public works. With that responsibility comes the obligation to periodically assess the state of our infrastructure, report on its condition and performance, and advise on the steps necessary to improve it. Today we'll be unveiling findings from the 2023 ASCE report card for Michigan's infrastructure. Today's findings include grades for each category of infrastructure, a cumulative grade for the state, and key findings of each of the chapters. This report is a snapshot tool for residents, municipalities, businesses, and policymakers to reference as they engage in conversation about where we are and where we want to be. It is not a reflection on the systems we have in place, not the people, excuse me, it is not a reflection on the systems we have in place, but rather not on the people who work every day to maintain those systems. We have made great strides over the years, but we hope that this information provides additional insights and rekindles important discussions about how necessary it is that we prioritize the system Michigan residents rely on each and every day. Next, I'd like to introduce Brad Ewert II, current president of ASCE Michigan. Brad is also the Vice President of Corporate Development at SME, and Brad will walk us through the report card.
Thanks, Andrew, for the introduction. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us here locally today and online. With infrastructure at the forefront of political dialogue these days, thanks to the passage of the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act of 2021, it's great that we can come together in a forum such as this to focus on our own state's infrastructure and the important role it plays in our safety and economic stability. With that, let's dive into the findings from the report. Using a simple and familiar A to F school report format, the 2023 report card provides a comprehensive assessment of current infrastructure conditions and needs. The 2023 report card for Michigan's infrastructure covers 14 categories. These categories include aviation, bridges, dams, drinking water, energy, inland waterways, public parks, rails, roads, schools, solid waste, stormwater, transit, and wastewater. And we also provided a spotlight on broadband. However, not enough data is available to provide a grade. Each category is assessed by a volunteer team of civil engineers who assign the grades according to the following 8 criteria: capacity, condition, funding, future need, operation and maintenance, public safety, resilience, and innovation. Our state is home to some of the oldest infrastructure in the nation, and we face increasingly severe weather events. Michigan's infrastructure is also dealing with decades of deferred maintenance as we have been kicking the proverbial can down the road in regard to fixing and maintaining these critical systems in the past. Despite recent efforts to address these issues, our infrastructure is still under immense strain. I would like to thank our committee champions who diligently volunteered their time to complete the report card. We would not be here today without your extraordinary efforts. So without further ado, let's discuss the grades. The cumulative grade for the 2023 report card for Michigan's infrastructure is a C-. A C- means our infrastructure is in mediocre condition and requires attention. This is an improvement from the D+ Michigan received in the 2018 state report card, demonstrating the progress our policymakers and agencies have made in recent years to improve conditions. A C- is the same as the national grade of C-, given in ASCE's 2021 report card for America's infrastructure. This cumulative grade is reflective of the data available to us. With so much growth and new projects underway throughout the state, could surely improve if we keep our foot on the gas. Michigan agencies and businesses have a lot to be proud of from this report after implementing several major short-term funding mechanisms to address long overlooked components of the built environment. However, it is important to note that we began these recent efforts with major hills to climb, and it will take time and continued efforts to see more drastic grade increases. It is important to say the report card is not meant to be a commentary on, nor an evaluation of, the performance of any department or agency. On the contrary, our teams found in most cases our government officials are doing exemplary work with the resources allotted to them. In the 2023 report, 5 grades increased and 2 grades decreased from the 2018 report, and the others remained unchanged. The 5 that increased were drinking water, rail, roads, schools, and stormwater, while the 2 that decreased were bridges and energy. It should be noted that of the 14 categories assessed in our report, 7 of them had grades higher than the national average. Just like the national report, broadband did not receive a grade due to the lack of reliable data on the condition of the distribution network. However, we did provide an overview of broadband infrastructure in our state. This is a testament to Michigan's agencies, utilities, and policymakers for making strides towards improving our built environment to make life better for all Michigan residents and businesses. The grades have gone up largely in part due to increased prioritization of infrastructure by the state through a variety of one-time or short-term funding mechanisms to close the investment gaps of a variety of sectors, including roads and bridges, schools, aviation, and water systems. Federal programs like the Federal Infrastructure Law and the CARES Act and ARPA are also to thank. However, long-term funding programs or revenue streams are lacking, which threatens our ability to fully maintain and restore our infrastructure network. For example, the Rebuilding of Michigan Plan in 2021 included the sale of $3.5 billion in bonds to fund highway projects. However, current funding estimates drop off by 51% in 2027 when the program ends, which would fail to address the full maintenance backlog of our roads. Roads received a D grade in our report, an improvement over D- in 2018, and on par with the national average. These programs have led to real results. In 2018, only 20% of Michigan's roads were in good condition. Now, 25% of our roads are in good condition, a noteworthy improvement and testament to the work being done by MDOT to make the most of the resources given to them. However, the national average for roads in good condition is 42%, and even that number is one we would like to see improved throughout the country. This means we have a long path ahead towards realizing a surface transportation network businesses and residents can be fully satisfied with. According to the Transportation Road Infrastructure Program, or TRIP, Michigan households withstand more than $1,000 per year in additional vehicle operating costs due to faulty road infrastructure. Bridges are another area that have received funding boosts, but the conditions have not yet reached target goals. 11% of our bridges are in good condition, which is more than the 7% national average. While this percentage is the same as it was in 2018 report, the grade went down this cycle because the number of bridges in fair condition has risen to 54%, while the number in good condition has dropped to 35%. The new grade for bridges is a D+ compared to the 2018 grade of C- and the 2021 national grade of a C. The federal infrastructure law is projected to give Michigan nearly $8 billion over 5 years for transportation systems, but without the certainty that the bill will be extended beyond 2026, it is difficult for the state departments to plan long-term projects. Drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater systems have all benefited from short-term funding allotments, both from the federal infrastructure law and from the Michigan Clean Water Plan. The Michigan Clean Water Plan provides an additional $500 million to water systems throughout the state. This is a contributing factor to the drinking water grade rising from a D in 2018 to a D+ in 2023. Agencies have been implementing asset management plans for both transportation and water infrastructure sectors, which is a great tool for maximizing available resources. Asset management software and operational policy or practices allows departments to analyze infrastructure conditions in real time so they can plan when it is most necessary to make repairs or replacements. This prevents unexpected failures, which are very costly, or unnecessary maintenance or repairs for systems that are still operating smoothly. However, most of the water infrastructure in Michigan was installed in the 1970s, and the majority of distribution pipelines have aged beyond their 50-year design life. As of now, less than 1% of pipelines are replaced annually. As for wastewater, which received a D+, 1.3 million households are serviced by aging septic systems, while 2.7 million households are served by aging wastewater treatment and conveyance systems. And the state has spent hundred millions to address combined sewage overflows, which is when a sewage line overflows due to excessive rainfall and the contaminated water spills into nearby communities and streams. These efforts have been successful at reducing the annual combined sewage discharges from 10 billion gallons to 4 billion gallons, a major improvement. However, roughly 50% of the rivers and streams in Michigan exceed the water quality standards for E. coli, and 20% of monitored beaches have had closures due to bacterial pollution. Lastly, the Michigan Clean Water Plan has provided a boost for these systems, but an estimated $2.7 billion funding gap remains for our aging wastewater treatment systems, and long-term funding mechanisms to close this gap have not been determined. For the sake of time, we won't go heavily into the details, but other categories that have received substantial short-term funding allotments but lack long-term funding security include aviation, which received a C, inland waterways, which received a C, public parks, which also received a C, and schools, which received a C-. All of these grades are graded higher than the national averages. The last section we'll touch on is energy, which dropped 2 spots from a C- in 2018 to a D in 2023. Michigan's energy grid has been dealing with reliability issues for years, but they have increased since the 2018 report. We experience slightly more interruptions to power services than the national average, and it takes roughly 37% longer for our services to be restored after an outage. The transmission and distribution network for our grid is aging beyond its design life, and will need to be addressed to prevent worsening outages, particularly as increasingly frequent severe weather events hit the region. So these grades show that Michigan legislators and agencies are continuing to work hard and improving our built environment, but there is plenty of work left to be done. The federal infrastructure law is a major boon for Michigan, and it has already announced more than $5.3 billion to Michigan's infrastructure, with many more funds soon to be announced. If we are ready to improve upon what we've already accomplished, ASCE has some suggestions to start raising the grades. First, we must enhance and expand dedicated funding for infrastructure at the state and local levels. In the last 5 years, Michigan roads have improved, airports have held steady or sought new capacity, schools have increased facility spending, and water systems have started chiseling away their project queues. Looking ahead, these infrastructure systems cannot sustain progress or seriously reduce investment gaps without greater predictable funding. Secondly, we need to proactively attack the workforce development challenges. This is a problem every state in the nation is facing. The infrastructure workforce makes improvement possible, and most employers are now struggling to retain, hire, or train staff. Government leaders, the private sector, educational institutions should coordinate efforts so Michigan can maximize the positive benefits of recent federal and state investments. Finally, we need to focus infrastructure planning and design on resilience and reliability. Michigan's energy grid was unreliable in recent storm events, and stormwater infrastructure is not prepared for increasingly unpredictable and high magnitude weather. Decision makers should advance upgrades to infrastructure systems which stay operational during adverse events, using redundancy and other methods to withstand the worst expected environmental conditions. Now, I would like to bring Ron Brenke, Executive Director of ASCE Michigan, for introduction of our guest speakers. Ron?
Thank you, Brad. Thanks for going through that extensive report. Obviously, we encourage everyone to get into more details that we didn't cover today at infrastructurereportcard.org/Michigan. You can find detailed information on all the chapters that we have announced today. We do have a few industry partners here that would like to make some comments. Our first industry partner is Brad Wiefrich with the Michigan Department of Transportation. He is the acting director. So, Brad.
Thanks, Ron, and thanks, Brad, for the work of ASDE and your teams. I Just a few quick comments from the department's perspective. It is nice to see that we did improve our roads grades. On the trunk line side, I think we've had some injections of funding, not the least of which has been the governor's Rebuilding Michigan program that's allowed us to tackle some very large projects on some of our heaviest traveled corridors. I also appreciated the fact that it talked about how we operate our system. For many years we talk about, just rebuilding, repairing, reconstructing, but we know that from the public's perspective, we need to maximize everything we can get out of what we currently have, and really leveraging technologies where applicable. I think a couple of good examples that were mentioned in there are the flex route projects. We did one north of Ann Arbor, 2018, I believe, and now we're building on those successes and doing extending that route on 23 as well as I-96 in western Oakland County. Also very pleased to see the acknowledgments of our STIC National Excellence Award. STIC stands for State Transportation Innovation Council. And that's a council that consists of the departments, our local partners, our industry partners, where we come together and really brainstorm and talk about from each of our perspectives on how can we do better, how can we continue to maximize the funding that we're provided. So receiving that national award in 2021 was pretty special. Also appreciated the acknowledgement of our work with cable median barriers. I know I can remember when we first started putting these up on our freeways, they weren't the most popular appurtenances for folks to feel like they were running into, but they have done a great job where we've been able to implement them of mitigating some pretty horrific cross-median crashes. But speaking about traffic safety, there's also some concerning trends that we're all seeing as well. Through the pandemic, we've seen excessive speeds. We've seen more drunk driving. We've actually seen seatbelt use go down throughout the pandemic. So we're going to continue to do the smart things and the innovative things that we can come up with to help improve safety. There's never going to be a way that we can completely human-proof the entire system, but I think it's really going to have to be an all-hands-on deck from the engineering perspective, from the enforcement perspective, from the education perspective, and really how we respond to emergencies to continue to move the needle or to reverse the move of the needle for safety in the positive direction. So again, thank you, appreciate the time.
Thank you, Brad. Appreciate all the good work the department has been doing over the years to implement the Rebuilding Michigan program as well as IIJA. Our next speaker is Amy O'Leary with Southeast Michigan Council of Governments. She's the Executive Director.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity today. So SEMCOG is a regional planning organization across 7 counties of metropolitan Detroit. We have both the regional planning arm of SEMCOG as well as we're a local government association of counties, cities, villages, townships, intermediate school districts, and community colleges. We're home to about half the state's population with $4.7 million. It's important to recognize that quality infrastructure is essential for our region and state to thrive. It's also important to recognize the vastness of our infrastructure systems and the needs from roads and bridges and transit to water infrastructure to broadband to parks and trails. We need all of them in quality condition for our region and state to thrive. We just heard about roads in our region. We have over 25,000 miles of public roads and more than 3,000 bridges. And while we're very excited about all the ongoing announcements of discretionary grants that we have received and really appreciate the leadership of MDOT in going for those discretionary grants, we now more than ever must address the findings of this report by providing additional, sustained, reliable investment in our transportation infrastructure. In the area of water infrastructure, we also have 113 water treatment facilities just in our region, 59 wastewater treatment plants, 377 dams. It's vast. tens of thousands of miles of pipe that has drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater pipes, many of them now getting to the end of their useful life. Our water infrastructure investment needs are growing at a pace that we have not experienced in previous years. Our region alone needs at least $3 billion annually to maintain the water infrastructure pipe systems to get them into good and fair condition. In that, stormwater funding is critical. Michigan is really unique in that, unlike many states, we have no funding mechanism that really supports stormwater infrastructure. And with trends and increasing rainfall, we are not going to build our way out of this. At SEMCOG, we stress three main strategies to help address stormwater funding. First, the state revolving loan fund program must support stormwater projects that address both flooding and water quality. Historically, less than 1% of those funds have supported stormwater projects. Second, supporting more stormwater projects in the state revolving loan fund is really important, but it cannot be accomplished without new stormwater utility legislation that provides a funding mechanism for local agencies to back up and pay those loans off. The stormwater legislation is also a funding mechanism for local agencies to maintain and improve their stormwater infrastructure. Finally, we recognize in stormwater that we're in an environment where flooding is becoming more frequent and trends in future rainfall are dramatically increasing. We need to think outside of the box in ways to address stormwater and flooding that will set the state of Michigan on a clear path to successfully addressing the climate challenges we have. SEMCOG's Green Initiative, which stands for Growing Our Resilience, Equity, and Economy with Nature, is on the leading edge of integrating this concept into our regional resiliency planning and future climate planning work. This includes additional investment in nature-based solutions, including increasing the urban tree canopy and managing stormwater with large-scale green infrastructure techniques. In the area of parks, although we're home to half of the state's population, we only have 2% of the state's public land. It has been a long-standing priority in many state and regional plans to increase the quality and quantity of parks in our region. We need to act on this priority. Overall, we know that only 40% of Southeast Michigan households are within walking distance to a park, despite the fact that 85% of these households are in areas that could have such walking access. Lastly, while the infrastructure network is complex and vast, as we spoke about, there's many owners, and agencies and communities are working diligently to seek out opportunities to build and repair our infrastructure more collaboratively. We have more need than available funding, and if we can coordinate infrastructure projects, for example, replacing the water and sewer mains and installing private utilities like broadband, while road construction projects are happening, we can leverage funding across all these sectors, completing projects more efficiently and effectively, providing a higher level of service for our customers and our residents. We are really grateful to the leadership of the Michigan Infrastructure Council in providing this space on infrastructure coordination as well. Thank you to ASCE for completing this report and continuing to shine a light on the critical infrastructure needs in our region and our state. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Appreciate your efforts at SEMCOG. Our last speaker is Lance Benanini. He is the Vice President of Government Affairs for the Michigan Infrastructure and Transportation Association, the contractors that build our great network throughout the state. So, Lance.
Thanks, Ron, and thank you all for being here. Again, Lance Benonimi, Vice President of Government Affairs for the Michigan Infrastructure and Transportation Association, or more commonly known as MITA. MITA represents a little over 500 companies that build our roads, bridges, underground water, sewer, and other specialty infrastructure projects. We are not surprised at all to see what we consider core grades of Michigan's infrastructure. Lawmakers in Lansing for decades have underinvested in our infrastructure, and here are the results. These grades should be unacceptable to every Michigan citizen. Keep in mind, even with the infusion of federal infrastructure dollars and the governor's bonding program, we still have a significant underinvestment problem here in Michigan. We're in a significant hole that we're working our way to climb out of. Just on our roads, the latest reports show that the state needs an additional $3.9 billion annually for the road and bridge network. For years, report after report has shown that our funding gap is growing. Only until we invest significantly more in our infrastructure will we see these grades improve. One of the most disturbing statistics that the director had mentioned in the report is the increase in total crashes and fatalities on our roadways in Michigan. We often think about the added cost to our vehicles because of poor roads. We don't often consider the safer roads can mean saving lives. Nothing is going to change in Lansing or on our investing in our infrastructure properly until the public demands better roads, passable bridges, and safer drinking water. It's time Michigan leaders enact a long-term, equitable, sustainable infrastructure investment plan for our state. We greatly appreciate the hard work that went into this report, and we sincerely hope that it serves as motivation for policymakers to take a closer look at properly investing our infrastructure.
Thank you very much, Lance. So at this time, we're happy to take a few questions. We don't have all the chapter authors here today, but we have several of them. So if anybody has any questions about the report, I'd be happy to take those questions now.
As much as you can speak to this, because it's more of a federal question, but not to overgeneralize here, but we do live in a country that tends to not want to fund our infrastructure. So compared to other states and the rest of the country, I mean, is this really bad, or is this pretty much on par with what we're seeing across the country too?
Yeah. Thanks, Ron.
Sure.
I'll get you back. Yeah, I mean, as I spoke about earlier, we match the national 2021 report card. So I think we're seeing similar results and similar cases across the country. I know that on some of our calls here these last couple months as we prepared for the release, we did have the same kind of question. How do we compare to other states, even in our region, like the mega region here and the Great Lakes? And it's pretty similar conditions as far as it goes from a funding and report card status. So it seems pretty consistent. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, in general, I think we're consistent with the rest of America, and it was mentioned earlier, we need to do more, not just in Michigan, but everywhere. So
Right.
Absolutely. Other questions?
Michigan currently has I think it's a $9 billion surplus at the moment. Are there any, priority projects off of that you guys would like to see more funding go to immediately?
Well, certainly, we would like to see more money go to infrastructure because of the grades that we're receiving. I know there is some planned money in there for bridge bundling. Bridges was obviously one of our worst graded categories, so we're hoping that makes it through the legislature. But certainly have other areas. Water and wastewater is obviously in bad need. Bridges could even use more than that. We need something more sustainable, though. The one-time infusions of money are great and they are helping, but what we're really concerned about is the long-term sustainable funding for the system, especially when we see more electric vehicles come into play. Obviously, that's going to erode the gas tax revenues, and we're going to have less revenue instead of more to help fund our roads and other infrastructure.
I think I've talked to Lance about this before, but wondering if anybody can speak to it. Are we still seeing, costs increasing as well? I mean, is the dollar going as far as it previously did? We've, of course, got inflation nationally. We've got worker shortages, which will probably require more pay. Are you still getting your same bang for the buck when you're spending money on infrastructure?
I think, as you mentioned, there's inflation throughout the economy. I think we're seeing definitely the same thing in material costs for projects. And Chris, I mean, you supply. I mean, you're seeing the same thing still, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
those
think,
are the headwinds for sure.
yeah, exactly. And then availability of materials continues to fluctuate. So some of that has to do with some of the inflation too. I think as availability can come back from the pandemic, we saw a lot of availability issues. You may see some costs go down, but ultimately inflation has caused a lot of issues. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then just to clarify, civil engineers, who are your members? Are they individuals? Are they companies? And what is a civil engineer?
Yeah,
do on a
great question.
infrastructure
So American Society of Civil Engineers is all individual members. So, there's people within companies that are members, but the company themselves are not signed up, are not like registered members. So it's all individual civil engineers. And in case of our report card committee, we are all volunteers.
But they work for private and public sectors?
That's right.
So
Yep.
they could work for counties, they could work for MDOT, they could work anywhere in civil engineering.
Gotcha. And they're the
Right.
folks that design the infrastructure projects that we're talking about, civil engineers, for the most
Yes,
part.
and you could have, some of the civils may work for contractors as well, and they'd be part of that. The variety of different members.
What you do have is different specialties. So you could have someone who's like Brad, a geotechnical type engineer, but then you also have wastewater engineers. They have specific specialties, so there's a big variety of that.
Yeah, variety that work as teams on projects. So no one person does it really at all. Right?
Thanks.
No problem. Other questions?
We have,
Question coming.
yeah, we have a Zoom question from Andrew at MERS. What would the cost from government be to get the report card to an A? How much would the civil engineering community stand to gain monetarily from doing that?
That's a
It's a
good
$1 billion question. Go, you want to
I-
Well, we know, we,
$1 trillion question is.
yeah, there's been multiple studies done. Public sector consultants did one for MIDA. We've seen one come out as well from the County Road Association. The cost to get this infrastructure up to A's is going to take, 3.9 billion, I think is what Lance mentioned that their report suggested. And this is going to take some time. I think that's the frustration people feel is, yeah, we've put a lot of money in the last several years, but it took a lot of time to get to the condition that we're in. All of the infrastructure in Michigan has been invested in for many, many years. It's been well documented that, other states are putting more per capita into their infrastructure than Michigan is. So it took us a long time to get to where we are, and it's going to take a while to get us up to higher grades. But it's really going to take the will of the legislature and the will of the leaders in Michigan to prioritize this and to invest the money that's needed to get these things in good condition. So I don't have an exact time frame, but it's going to take many, many years.
Other questions? Yeah, just like my landscape beds at the house, it takes time and money to make them look good.
Okay. Andrew, you want to close us out then?
Go ahead. You go in front.
Well, thank you all. Thank you, Brad, Amy, and Lance for joining us today. That was very helpful to get a different perspective from just the industry, the professionals in the industry. I'd like to close by saying that the future of our state relies on our ability to maintain and improve upon the current conditions of our most thriving infrastructure sectors, while also improving those that are lagging behind. Our infrastructure drives economic growth, creates jobs, improves public health, and protects us from extreme weather. We work hard to build and maintain our systems for the public health, safety, and welfare, and we ask that our policymakers review the 2023 report card for Michigan's infrastructure when making infrastructure policy that affects our citizens. I'd like to once again thank our report card committee who diligently completed the report card this year. As Brad mentioned, it was all volunteer time and they did a tremendous job. Some of them are here today with us to help support this. You will now be able to find the full report at infrastructurereportcard.org/Michigan. Again, that's infrastructurereportcard.org/Michigan. If you have further questions, please don't hesitate to email us at reportcard@asce.org. That's, again, reportcard @asce.org. Thank you all for joining us today for this opportunity to share the progress made, along with the critical steps which must be taken to continue to improve Michigan's infrastructure. We know where we're at. The next question is, where are we going? Thank you.